YouTube is flooded with fake gurus, but every once in a while you find a needle in a haystack. A creator that posts so much content that you can't help but click on every video they post. With 50 million downloads, 100 million views, 500,000 subscribers, and a net worth of $200 million, Anthony Pompliano is not your average YouTuber. He's interviewed some of the brightest minds in the world and pumps out content like it's nobody's business. But for such a well-known name in the finance space, Pomp doesn't even have a Wikipedia page, and his personal life is incredibly private. After listening to his podcast for countless hours and hearing his controversial thoughts on Bitcoin and the financial system as a whole, I wanted to figure out exactly how Pomp made his fortune and what are the main takeaways that we can use to help build our own empires. This is the story of Anthony Pompliano, the Bitcoin YouTuber with $200 million. It's 2012 and Anthony Pompliano is stationed in Iraq. Still a young man in his early 20s, he's out on his very first mission, driving overnight in a foreign country, away from family, away from friends, when all of a sudden, he and his fellow soldiers hear a massive whiz go by. Without any time to think, Pomp realizes what's happening. They're being shot at by a sniper in the distance. It is pitch black, and not knowing where the sniper is, they quickly duck down and grab cover, barely making it out alive. Fast forward, one day during a particularly dangerous mission, out of nowhere, an IED explodes. Pomp is okay, but a fellow US soldier was shot in the head and died. It's at this very moment that Pomp realized that the gun he held in his hands was real, and that it was real for a reason. He realized that he needed to take things seriously or he wouldn't make it back home. And these, according to Pomp, were the two most impactful experiences that he had in Iraq. Two experiences that would shape his life and transform him into the person that he is today. Unlike most public figures, there's really not any information online about Pomp's upbringing. He was born in 1988 and graduated from Bucknell University, receiving a Bachelor of Arts and a double major in economics and sociology. Not exactly knowing what he wanted to do with his life, he would then go on to serve in the US military for 6 years, from 2006 to 2012. These years were formative. They taught Pomp the value of discipline, hard work, perseverance, and what would eventually go on to be Pomp's slogan, relentlessness. But Pomp didn't want to stay in the military forever, and in 2012, it was time for a change. Having always been interested in economics and tech and wanting to leverage everything that he learned in the military, Pomp decided that it was time to leverage those experiences and do something new. And what we're about to see Pomp do next is a master class in forging new paths and starting new chapters, and ultimately going after what it is that you want in life, both unapologetically and, of course, relentlessly. It's now 2018 and Pomp has been out of the US military for 6 years and hasn't wasted a minute. Having now worked at Facebook and co-founded Digiforce, which would get acquired by Campaign Grid, Pomp has been seeing quick success and has been making a name for himself in the startup space. But in 2018, things were about to go to another level. In 2018, crypto started to become more mainstream, and Pomp's forward-thinking mindset led him to create Morgan Creek Digital Assets, a venture that would further solidify his reputation as an influential figure in the cryptocurrency and blockchain space. Pomp's earlier journey with Full Tilt Capital had already exposed him to the world of investing and nurturing startups. As his interest in cryptocurrencies grew, he realized that traditional investment firms were slow to embrace this new asset class. Seeing an opportunity to fill this gap, Pomp teamed up with Mark Yusko and Jason Williams, forming Morgan Creek Digital Assets as a subsidiary of Morgan Creek Capital Management. The formation of Morgan Creek Digital Assets was a bold move, as it aimed to bridge the gap between traditional investments and digital assets. The new firm focused on institutional clients, providing them with access to blockchain and cryptocurrency investments. Morgan Creek Digital Assets made headlines in 2018 when it launched a $40 million venture capital fund backed by investments from 2 public pension funds. This marked the first time public pension funds had invested in the cryptocurrency and blockchain space, a testament to the credibility and trust that Pomp and his partners had established in such a short period of time. This story highlights Pomp's ability to seize opportunities in emerging markets. By creating Morgan Creek Digital Assets, he brought cryptocurrencies and blockchain investments closer to mainstream finance, making a significant impact on the industry that continues to this day. Looking at Pomp's story, there are a lot of characteristics and traits that we could attribute to his success. But after diving into his story, I want to break it down into just 3 simple things that have led to Pomp's success in business and life. And if we as entrepreneurs adopt ourselves, we're going to be much more likely to succeed. Pomp's adaptability has been a cornerstone of his success. After leaving the military, Pomp transitioned to a role at Facebook as product manager, where he quickly learned the ropes of the tech industry. Afterward, as we saw, he co-founded Digiforce, a social media data analytics startup. When Digiforce was acquired, Pomp didn't rest on his laurels. He co-founded Full Tilt Capital, a venture capital firm that later pivoted to focus on blockchain and cryptocurrency investment. Each of these transitions highlights Pomp's adaptability, his ability to embrace change, and his readiness to dive into new industries. Vision is perhaps one of Pomp's greatest assets. In the early days of Bitcoin, when cryptocurrencies were still largely unknown, Pomp looked through the skepticism and recognized the potential to disrupt traditional financial systems, and as a result, invested heavily. Starting all the way back in 2013 when Bitcoin was just $1,000 a coin. He even managed to shift the focus of Full Tilt Capital towards cryptocurrency and blockchain investment. It's this early embrace of digital assets made only possible with his incredible vision that allowed Pomp to position himself as a leader in the finance and crypto space. Pomp isn't one to not practice what he preaches. Almost every day he tweets out, "Let's get after it relentlessly today." And that is exactly what he does. And we've seen this time and time again with Pomp, whether it's his military service or the persistence and relentlessness that he has had in business and growing his media empire. Take the adversity he faced at Full Tilt Capital. When they decided to pivot towards cryptocurrency and blockchain investments, they faced massive skepticism from traditional investors who told them it would never work and that crypto was just a fad. But Pomp remained relentless and continued to champion the potential of digital assets, even in the face of market fluctuations and regulatory challenges. His persistence eventually paid off when he co-founded Morgan Creek Digital Assets, which went on to secure a groundbreaking $40 million venture capital fund backed by public pension funds. As we've seen, Pomp's entrepreneurial spirit has driven him to explore new opportunities, take risks, and create meaningful change in the world of finance and technology. Now that we've explored the foundations of his success, it's time to dive deeper into one of the most important topics that you simply can't avoid when looking at Pomp, and that is his thoughts and approach on Bitcoin. And if you are not someone who believes or invests or trades crypto, learning what Pomp has to say about the topic just might convince you otherwise.
Bitcoin's up 55%. It's got a negative correlation, so it was negative 0.9 to S&P, negative 0.8 to gold. And I think that we're going to continue to see that play out where there's people around the world that are electing to put their wealth into something that is controlled by software and cannot be manipulated by a single country or politician.
Imagine buying Bitcoin all the way back in 2018 when it was just $3,000 a coin. If you invested $10,000, you'd have over $70,000 today. Or imagine if you invested 50% of your net worth back in 2018. Well, that's exactly what Pomp did in 2018, taking a massive bet by investing millions of dollars into Bitcoin when it just so happened to be near the bottom. Fast forward a couple of years, and with the COVID boom that sent Bitcoin as high as $60,000 a coin, all of a sudden, 90% of Pomp's net worth was tied up in Bitcoin. This means that Pomp isn't one to not put his money where his mouth is. And if you're anything like me, you like to learn from people that are very wealthy and successful. So the question that this raises is, well, why Bitcoin? Well, I spent countless hours diving deep into Pomp's thoughts on Bitcoin and crypto as a whole, so you don't have to, and I'm gonna break down his perspective into 3 parts. If you're new to Bitcoin and crypto, this is all you need to know. Bitcoin was created during the 2008 financial crisis by Satoshi Nakamoto, somebody who has remained anonymous to this day. It has 2 main features. Number 1, it's decentralized. This means that no one entity, company, bank, institution, or government can control it. This is important. Number 2, it's finite. 21 million Bitcoins were created, and it's impossible to create more. There will never be more than 21 million, making it a finite asset just like gold. These are the 2 foundational elements that you need to understand. But there's more. How does Bitcoin work? Don't take it from me, take it from the man himself.
Bitcoin works off of the same exact concept that Monopoly works on. So what I like to talk about is Bitcoin uses a transparent public ledger. And those are big fancy words that people use to try to sound smart. But what exactly is a transparent public ledger? It's simply, if you were playing Monopoly and you have 4 people sitting down in front of the board game, everybody sets up the board, you take the money and you put it out in front of you on the table, and then there's a bank. And that bank is a collection of all of the money that's not in an individual's, in front of them on the board. And the reason why there's only 4 people who are playing Monopoly, but you don't have a banker, is because there's full transparency in the game. So if I roll the dice and I pass go, I reach in the bank and I take $200. Everyone at the table can see that I took the $200 and I put it in my bank. If all of a sudden I buy a property or somebody buys one of my properties, the exchange of funds at the game is all done publicly and transparently for everyone to see. Because it's public and transparent during the game of Monopoly, there's no need for a third party or some sort of authoritative figure, right? When you're kids, you don't need your parents to sit over you and say, okay, Johnny, give the $200. It's just known that the 4 players at the table can understand because it's a public, transparent system.
As you can probably begin to see, Bitcoin and crypto is this incredible rabbit hole that I highly encourage you to dive down into because it is so interesting. But now that we have the foundational knowledge required, let's dive deep into Pomp's actual investment strategy.
Ultimately, what we're seeing is an entire generation of kids are saying, listen, if I look at financial assets across the board, I have stocks, I have bonds, I have currencies, and I have commodities. I know that bonds, from a real rate return perspective, is flat to negative, right? I'm going to make no money on this because I have a belief that my dollar is being devalued. And actually what we're starting to see is, again, the internet has broken down these walled gardens and kind of these centralized hubs of information, in that if you were to look at, let's say, the stock market from 1971 to today in dollar terms, it's a 45-degree angle right up and to the right? It's kind of 7, 8, 10% growth every year. And it's amazing. Just get invested in the stock market and you'll make money over a long period of time, regardless of the dips along the way. If you denominate that same stock market in gold, the stock market is down since 1971. And so is it so much that the stock market is accruing true value, or is it that the underlying currency in which it is denominated in?
This is an incredible point that I haven't heard a single other person discuss. The question is, are stocks actually rising because companies are providing more value? I'm not so sure about that. In this podcast, he goes on to say that a traditional portfolio of 60-40, 60% in stocks and 40% in bonds, just isn't going to get it done anymore. And of course, this is reflected in 90% of Pomp's net worth being tied to Bitcoin. Pomp makes it clear that to properly invest to build massive wealth like he has, while still being young, the old school approach isn't going to cut it. And this is where we can learn a lot from him. Pomp does just 2 things that lay the foundation for his entire investment strategy. He, 1, focuses on innovation, and secondly, he thinks long term. This accomplishes a few things. Take the NASDAQ, for example. It's one of the most volatile indexes because it's so tech heavy, but it also provides the largest returns. But these returns can only be realized if you have a long-term approach and don't sell your investments when you see a 20% dip. Something that might sound straightforward, but is something that very few investors actually do. But Pomp, fortunately, is one of them. Beyond that, his focus on innovation is what will allow him to have massive wins. If I had to guess, Pomp doesn't own any S&P 500 ETFs. He's betting on the future. He's betting on innovation and disruption. And that is why he invests in tech and cryptocurrency, 2 very volatile industries, but the ones that offer the largest upside. Put it simply, Pomp is not doing any small boy stuff. He has incredible conviction and has said that Bitcoin is the investment of this generation.
Yeah, Liz, thanks so much for having me. I understand that people want to kind of talk about week-to-week performance, month-to-month performance, but I think that Bitcoin is a unique asset in that it forces people to be a long-term thinker about it. And if you really look over the last couple of years, there's been incredible volatility. We've seen prices go up hundreds of percent. We've seen drawdowns that have been 50 to 75%. And so the people who end up kind of winning by holding the asset are folks who use timeless investing principles. They dollar cost average into an asset, they hold it for a long time, and it happens to be the trade of this generation. If you go back 20 years ago, the winners and losers were pretty much determined by who bought the internet stocks and who didn't. And if you could hold the right ones for a long time, you ended up having outsized returns. And so I think that the trade of this generation is going to be who bought this asset and who didn't. Now you got to hold it for a long period of time and you can't get sucked up into that day-to-day volatility. But if you follow those timeless investing principles.
But he doesn't just focus on the potential upside that Bitcoin might bring. Putting 90% of his net worth into Bitcoin might actually be safer than if he parked 90% of his wealth into a fiat denominated asset that is losing value over time, because after all, we're experiencing, as we all know, record high inflation.
Right. And what I mean by that is I think that the debt limit crisis, there are a lot of people who are saying, how do I hedge a potential US default? Well, I probably needed something outside of the system. I need an alternative. Bitcoin can help solve that. There's people who say, hey, I need something that will hedge me from currency debasement. I need something outside of the system. Bitcoin can solve that. I think there's people who say, hey, I need to hedge the risk around the banking system. I need something outside of the system. I need an alternative. Bitcoin can solve that. And so you can go through all of these kind of cracks in that legacy system. And again, I don't think majority of people are taking 100% or even 50% of their net worth and they're buying Bitcoin. I very much think that the majority of folks are going and they're putting some percentage, maybe 1 to 5% into Bitcoin. And they're saying, this is the chaos hedge. This is the insurance in case there are significant issues in that legacy system. Well, and what is fascinating to me is that that system now has been adopted by over 150 million people around the world. And so if you think about that, you could line up every single American citizen and about 1 out of every 2 of them now believe that this system is worthy of some portion of the economic value that they've earned in their life, which is absolutely incredible to only be, 15 years or so into this.
Pomp's incredible conviction and belief in Bitcoin is what led me down the deep rabbit hole of crypto. And because of it, I've now allocated over 10% of my net worth into Bitcoin and will likely increase my allocation over time. But that's not the only thing that I've learned from Pomp that has changed my life. Pomp has built an incredible media empire that is worth studying because in the 21st century, attention is the new oil. And after looking into it, we're still very early in the game. Since 2018, Pomp has posted over 3,000 videos, has over 500,000 subscribers on YouTube, garnering over 115 million views, and has built a daily newsletter with over 235,000 subscribers. And on top of that, he's been a guest multiple times on mainstream media platforms like Fox News. Pomp, to put it simply, is a content powerhouse. How can anybody create as much content as he does, both in terms of how do you have that much to say, but also logistically? I can make an entire video diving deep into Pomp's content strategy, but just by touching the surface, I've discovered that there are 3 things that he has done to build his media empire that has turned it into a money printing machine. Principle number 1, consistency. Pomp could have just made a handful of YouTube videos telling his story, sharing his thesis on Bitcoin, and called it a day. But that's not what he did. Instead of staying in bed and riding off into the sunset with his millions of dollars, Pomp every day decides to get up and pump out content. Pomp typically posts at least 1 YouTube video a day, sometimes more, but doesn't do it in the flip-flopping, clickbaity, scammy way that Meet Kevin does. Pomp posts daily updates on Bitcoin, the overall crypto market, the general economy, and tons of business-related content. Because of that, he's become a go-to for investment knowledge and insights into what's going on in the market. None of that would have been accomplished if he gave up after a month, 6 months, or even just a couple of years. Carving out a name for yourself in such a popular and competitive space can only be done through consistency, and that consistency is only possible with principle number 2. Principle number 2, build first. Alex Hormozi has a great quote where he talks about his content strategy. He says, number 1, do shit. Second, talk about what you did. And third, repeat. This can't be understated. There are so many people talking online about what you should do and haven't done any cool shit themselves. And I'm guilty of it too. Many people are, because it's some of the easiest content that you can possibly make. How many videos have we seen of 7 side hustles to make $100 a day? Is anybody who's making those videos actually taking pictures of Airbnbs or flipping stuff they bought at garage sales? Of course not, because they're garbage ideas, but they're easy ideas to come up with. And so that's why there's thousands of videos that are just copy and paste. Of course not, because they're such garbage ideas, but they're such easy ideas to come up with. And that's why there are thousands and thousands of these videos online, and all of them are just copy and paste. Pomp avoided this and brings real value to the table because he had a ton of experience under his belt long before he started the content game. You don't need to be a 10 out of 10 genius in every topic before you make content, but Pomp has and continues to do cool shit, and that's what keeps his content interesting. Without it, he would just run out of ideas to talk about, or he would just make the same video over and over again like many content creators do. But here's the deal, even many content creators that are consistent never pop off. So what's the secret? Principle number 3, don't apologize. Let's face it, everybody nowadays is coddled, and the world wants all of us to be vanilla. to not stick out, to just get along, to not have any really strongly held beliefs. Sometimes that's fine. In fact, if you want to live a boring life, it's always fine. But in the world of content creation, this is a perfect recipe for going absolutely nowhere. In a recent video that I made on Salt Bae, I looked at how he, a guy who never talks, built a net worth of $75 million through a meme. And I'll give you the secret. He's not vanilla, and he doesn't apologize. Pomp has many strongly held beliefs that he doesn't shy away from, and in fact, he actually leans into them. Recent interview on Fox, he said he'd bet his life on Bitcoin. We can find another example going back to 2015 when Pomp was fired from Snapchat just 3 weeks into the job when he alleged that Snapchat was exaggerating its growth metrics in order to pump up its IPO. Working at such a young and quickly growing company, Pomp easily could have turned away and ignored what he was seeing, but he didn't do that. He did what he thought was right and he leaned into his beliefs. We also see Pomp not being vanilla with his investment strategy. He doesn't say, oh, I'm going to put a little bit into the S&P 500, put a little bit into dividend stocks, a little bit into bonds, and then I'll have a small allocation to Bitcoin. No, he believes in Bitcoin, he believes in tech, and he uses that conviction to dictate his decisions. Not apologizing for what he thinks, putting his money where his mouth is, doing cool shit first and posting second. This is how Pomp built his media empire. And that is Anthony Pompliano, the $200 million Bitcoin YouTuber. Thanks for watching. Play the long game. See you in the next one. Peace.